Hey, welcome back to The Dive. Today on the show, we have the great Doug Casey joining us from Casey Research. He's going to share his thoughts on what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, inflation, energy, Biden in the midterms, gold, and what investors can do to protect themselves and their money in this environment. But before we bring you Doug's interview, do me one quick favor and just go ahead and smash on that subscribe button below me there so we can keep making you these videos. Hey Doug, welcome to The Dive.
Well, thank you, Cassandra. It's very nice to be here.
Let's start off with this week, Putin announced Russia will impose martial law on 4 regions in Ukraine. What is your view on what's happening in Russia and Ukraine right now?
Okay. I will take what is today in the West a contrary view. And what's happening in the Ukraine should be back on page 6 of the New York Times, where it would merit a couple of columns, because what's going on between Russia and the Ukraine is basically a border war between 2 shithole countries. Border wars have been going on in that part of the world with migrations of people and the changing of political boundaries for about 1,000 years. Roughly speaking, that's an accurate number. So this is just a continuation of that. And it should be rather meaningless. And all Putin really wanted out of this, after massive provocations actually it was a Russian stooge in 2014, and the Maidan Revolution was so-called, was overthrown by an American stooge, of which Zelensky is the latest iteration. And the Russians have been massively provoked, because you'll recall, most people are unaware of this, actually, believe it or not, that in 2014, these 2 provinces in the Ukraine, Donetsk and Lugansk, seceded from the Ukraine. Perfectly legitimate thing to do. They're mostly Russians. And what happens? The Ukrainian army, basically trained by the US, launches an attack, killing many, many thousands of people. So there's been a war that's been fought in the Ukraine since 2014 with the secession of these provinces. And then, as the rump government of the Ukraine and Kiev, run by Zelensky, has made motions towards joining NATO, it's actually within the context of there aren't any good guys or bad guys in this thing. I mean, they make out Putin to be, the worst thing since Stalin or Hitler. Actually, he is the most rational and cool-headed of these nothing nobodies that are running Europe. Tried to, well, any event, at this point, because of American involvement and pushing and pushing and pushing, I hope this doesn't turn into global thermonuclear war. So that's my take on it in a nutshell. You'll probably get a few reactions to that, because everybody thinks that Zelensky is the reincarnation of Jesus and, Putin is the devil. Actually, these things are often being phrased in religious terms today, which is equally ridiculous. It's a border war between 2 shithole countries where the US is sticking its nose in. And I hope it doesn't get out of control.
Okay, well, let's shift gears a little bit here. IKEA, known for its affordability, has seen some products become 80% more expensive in under a year. Do you think that we will see more price hikes from different companies?
Yes, we will. And the reason for that is because the US in particular, but all Western governments, are printing up new currency units, not just by the billions, but by the trillions. By the trillions. And in the last, let's say, 5 years, the US has expanded the money supply by, how many trillions has it been? 10 trillion. And at the same time, they've locked down and actually changed the character of the society with the COVID hysteria. And now this war in the Ukraine, where resources from Russia have been cut off, yeah, prices are going a lot higher. They're going a lot higher because the governments are still printing up money. They have to. If the government wants to pay its bills, and that comes first, but only the government can print up money, and that's what they're doing. So, yeah, this is really, really serious, and it's just begun.
Now, the Federal Reserve has different narratives on inflation, from no inflation to inflation being transitory to inflation being a good thing. And when it became obvious that inflation was not good, they told us not to worry because they had it under control. Do you think that the Federal Reserve can get inflation under control?
The Federal Reserve should be abolished. It actually serves no useful purpose. Once again, people forget that the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, and it was basically supposed to be a clearinghouse for banks. But since then, it's taken control of the money supply and replaced gold, which was all we really needed for money, with Federal Reserve notes. And then silver went out of the money in the 60s. And now, thanks to the Federal Reserve, we're moving into an era of central bank digital currencies, which are about the most disastrous and, I dare say, evil innovation in all of monetary history. It means that you will really not own anything that the government doesn't directly control and monitor. So talking about what the Fed should do, to me, is missing the point entirely. People should be talking about whether the Fed or any central bank should exist. They shouldn't exist, actually.
Doug, what do you think is going to happen with energy prices this winter?
Let me tell you a joke. Let me preface this with a joke. St. Peter, Einstein, dies and goes to heaven. St. Peter greets him, glad to see you. Unfortunately, we have a temporary housing shortage here in heaven because, for obvious reasons, we're a centrally planned economy. So you'll have to bunk with 3 other guys for the time being. So St. Peter meets his 3 new, Einstein meets his 3 new roommates. First guy says, "I'm so happy to meet you. I've got an IQ of 130, Mr. Einstein. I'd like to get to know you better." Einstein says, "Great. After lunch, let's bounce around some concepts of astrophysics I've had on my mind." Second guy comes up to him and says, "Mr. Einstein, I'm so pleased to meet you. I'm not as smart as that first guy. I've only got an IQ of 100, but I want to get to know you better." So Einstein says, "Great, let me put my grip away and let's play a game of chess." Third guy comes up and says, "Not as smart as others. I've only got an IQ of 70, but I want to get to know you better." So Einstein asks him, "So where do you think interest rates are going?" I think that's a funny joke. And you could say the same with energy prices, but it's a little bit different because there's an active campaign, and there has been for at least 10 years, to go green with energy. No more fossil fuels, no more gas or oil or coal or even nuclear, which is actually kind of a fossil fuel. They want everything to be green, which means either solar or wind. Well, I have nothing against solar or wind. They're fine for local applications. The technologies keep getting better. They're useful occasionally, but they're not the basis for a large industrial society to run on. So the fact that governments everywhere are actively trying to quash fossil fuels and allocate huge amounts of capital, hundreds and hundreds of billions, to uneconomic things like solar and wind, it's going to result in a total disaster. The answer to the question is, I think they're going think they're going much higher. The fact that we're entering a depression where the standard of living is going to collapse, yeah, that might cut back the demand side of energy for a while. But I think within the next year or two, partially because of this war in the Ukraine, but mostly because of idiotic government policies in the West, we're looking at $100, $150 oil. Coal's going higher. Gas is going to go a lot higher in the US, not just in Europe. So the standard of living is going a lot lower. It's going to be very unpleasant and inconvenient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're the first person that said depression to me. Most people say they're heading towards a recession. So you think depression's on the table here?
No, this is, look, it's not just going to be a recession. I call it the Greater Depression. It's going to be much worse and much longer lasting and much different than the unpleasantness of 1929 to 1946, which was not a mellow time if you look at those years. So hold on to your hat.
Okay, so let's move on here. What do you think Biden's biggest problem going into midterms is?
First of all, when we say Biden, we ought to put Joe Biden in quotes because he's non compos mentis. He's actually a deluded and senile old guy. It's elder abuse, his being kept in office. And I'm not exactly sure who's pulling the strings in back of him. These horrible people he's got around him. He's being controlled by actual Jacobins. In other words, the people in Washington now are exactly the same people as were running France in the early 1790s. They're Jacobins. They share the same psychology. They share the same political outlook, the same worldview. Well, this is really, really serious because regardless of who wins in November for the midterms, these horrible people have control of Washington for the next 2 years. And I think they're going to try to keep control because of the way they're oriented. They're like the Bolsheviks, the same thing. So what will Joe Biden do? Joe Biden in quotes. I don't know. We're dealing with the person who's, allows himself to be seen eating an ice cream cone in public. I mean, who sniffs little girls' hair consistently in public, who says stupid, nonsensical things, who has a press secretary. And this whole thing is like a comedy. This is like the type of thing that you expect to see as a civilization is collapsing, which it actually is. I'm talking about not just the US, but the West. Sorry if I'm being too gloomy for you here, Cassandra.
No, that's okay. We want to hear the truth. So
I think it's the truth. I think it's the truth. It's what I believe, certainly. I think it's the truth.
Well, thanks for sharing. Now, some argue that now is an ideal time for gold to perform. What is your take on how the price of gold has performed recently?
I think gold is reasonably priced in this area where it is. And I've said that for several years. In other words, I've been buying gold since it was about $40 an ounce, and I'm very happy. It's gone 40, 50 to 1, and I've used it as a savings vehicle over that time. Occasionally, however, it's a great speculation. I think right now it's at the low end of where it should, quote unquote, be relative to everything else, whether we're talking about a good dinner or a good suit. It's about where it should be. I think it's going to go a lot higher, though, because we're looking at actual monetary chaos in the years to come. And there's going to be a panic into gold. And I think it's going to go way above where it should be. I'm happy to buy it right now. And I'm not concerned about the fact that as we speak, it's down $15 today. The market fluctuates. So buy gold for safety and prudence and insurance. That's why you want to buy gold today. But also, I think it's getting to the point where it's going to, again, be a good speculation on the upside.
Now, if governments can implement a windfall profits tax on energy, there's a chance that it can be implemented in other sectors too. Do you think that this will hurt the investment case for gold?
Absolutely. Look, the prime directive of all living things, whether we're talking about a gigantic bloated government or a tiny amoeba, is survive. So you can expect the government to do what it needs to survive at any cost. And that could include windfall profits tax against people that they don't like in industries they don't like. So absolutely, they need revenue. They want revenue to do all the wonderful things that government does. So yeah, we can expect stuff like windfall profits tax at this point. I mean, don't forget, the US government is running $1 trillion, maybe a $2 trillion per year deficit at this point, being financed by printing money. So they're going to try to raise taxes at the same time. Windfall profits tax will be part of it.
How do you feel about gold mining stocks in this environment?
They're very different from gold, and they're a purely speculative vehicle. I've been involved with gold mining stocks for basically my whole life. And I've come to view them as basically a crappy business for all kinds of reasons. I mean, no wonder Warren Buffett's never touched them. That's the downside. And I can give you all the reasons why they're a terrible business. But on the bright side, they're an extremely volatile class of securities. And when gold runs, these things can howl. And individual mining stocks, not just over the course of years, but over the course of 2 or 3 years, can go 10 to 1, 100 to 1. They can go 1,000 to 1. So that I think now, right now, is a very good time to own gold mining stocks in general and commodity stocks in more general terms.
So, Doug, after everything we've discussed, what advice can you give to average investors to protect themselves and their money from what's happening in the world right now?
Yeah, I hope it doesn't get too serious. But look, produce more than you consume. That's important, and save the difference. And you should save the difference not in dollars, which are floating abstractions, but save it in gold, which is real. And I think gold will, in the decades to come, be reinstituted as day-to-day money, as unbelievable as that may sound right now. So do that. That's number one. And redouble your efforts to build your financial assets before we get too much further into this depression, because things are going to get rough. There's going to be lots of unemployment, much higher inflation. There's going to be businesses failing. It's going to be quite unpleasant and inconvenient. So gird your loins against that now. It's another religious term, isn't it? Well.
Okay, so we have one last question for you here, Doug. For our viewers, what can you tell us about your recent book?
Oh, my most recent book is called Assassin. It's the third of 7 novels which are coming out, the Charles Knight series. And I urge all of your viewers to go on Amazon and perhaps start the series with Speculator, where Charles Knight gets involved in a mining deal in Africa. And then he gets involved in a bush war. And then read the second book, which is called Drug Lord, where he gets involved in the drug business, both FDA regulated and DEA regulated, because of course, with the recent COVID hysteria, drugs have, they come and go to center space in our society. But the most recent one is Assassin, where Charles decides there are some people that just need killing. And from here, you don't want to fall behind in this set of novels because they get more radical from Assassin. The next one, which is called Terrorist, will be out by this time next year with a little bit of luck.
Oh, so it's not just a trilogy. There's going to be 4?
No, there'll be 7 by the time it ends.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on here today, Doug, and I wish you great success with your novels.
Well, thank you, Cassandra, and I wish you great success in everything.
Thanks. To our audience at home, thank you so much for watching today. We'll be back again tomorrow, but in the meantime, if you'd like to hear more from Doug, be sure to check him out on Twitter at RealDougCasey or find him on the web at www.theinternationalman.com. We'll see you tomorrow, and bye.